I want to add something to the elders' teaching, which occurs to me and I've said before. I mean, besides the obvious scriptural passage, if they persecute me, they will persecute you. But also, there's something that the Lord said. If I be lifted up on the cross, he said, I will draw all men to myself. If I be lifted up, the Son of Man be lifted up on the cross, he will draw all men to himself. Is this not applicable also to the church? If the church is not lifted up on the cross, it is not an organ of salvation. It is not drawing men to Christ. It is not imitating Christ in the crucifixion. It is not a means to salvation. Insofar as those who call themselves Christian or even in the Orthodox Church who are not a part of this mystery and seeking it out. Now, we are weak and worldly and lukewarm Christians, but we have to at least seek and beg God to make us worthy to be lifted up on that cross, to carry that cross, to accept the crucifixion, to accept the persecution, to accept the rejection of the world. We have to be ready and willing to do that if we want to be a part of that drawing all men to Christ. This is exactly the opposite of what? The spirit of Antichrist, secularization. What does it do? It does the opposite. It identifies with those who did not and refused to ascend the cross. It identifies with the Pharisees who say, come down from the cross, and then we will believe. That's the secularized church of Antichrist. We have to do the opposite if we're going to be with Christ and be a conduit, a point of reference for the world to meet and embrace Christ, and therefore ourselves be saved, right? We can't be indifferent to the others around us and not have any witness to them and expect ourselves to be with Christ. He says, they will know you are my disciples by your love, first and foremost, of Christ, of course, and of the brethren. And that love is crucifixion. That's the love he showed us. He showed us the cross as the organ of love, self-denial and crucifixion. This is how the world is drawn to Christ. Insofar as Christians turn away from that, embrace the secularization of the church, are reconciled to the world, and do not witness and are not martyred for that witness against the spirit of Antichrist, which includes all of this insanity that we're living through. Right? All of the isms of our day, the nihilism that we see around us. If we're not witnessing against that, teaching people to flee that, and ourselves are not ascended to the cross and crucified continually, that means our passions, that means the ways of the world and the thinking of the world. If we're not a part of that mystery of the cross, we're a stumbling block and not a conduit for the salvation of our brothers and sisters. God give us that illumination, that strength, and that love of the crucifixion. So the question, of course, comes among all those who think in a worldly terms, they're good-willed, they're loving, wonderful people, I'm sure. We all are. We have our weaker aspects, but can't God find a better, easier way? Come on. Do you have to go through this? Love and freedom are inseparable, brothers and sisters. This is going to be the great temptation of the last times, the great temptation of all the Christians, many Christians who are still with one foot in the world and don't understand the mystery of the cross. This is the great temptation. They're going to say, where is God? Why doesn't he intervene? Why isn't God able to intervene? In other words, put an end to the persecution, put an end to the crucifixion, put an end to the trials, tribulations, and all of that which is contrary to the church, the suffering of the people of God. Why doesn't he intervene? Where is he? Where is God? Oh, we hear this so often. Why didn't God stop this death? Why didn't he stop this disease? Why didn't he stop this persecution? All the time we hear this from Christians. Elder Athanasius says, if he intervenes, you and I will tell him, you will tell me that he is controlling you. He's not leaving you free. He's binding your freedom. This is also what we hear. I don't go to church because you all are a bunch of enslaved, to Pharisees, whatever it is. There's various ways people explain this in their perception of the church's life. Why does God choose this seemingly worst solution? Forgive me for the typos. I was writing this, as I said, on the way here from the doctor. It is because God loves and he wants to show his love. He offers his son to be crucified. He could have used another method. He could use another method to save the world, but he chose not to. He chose to save the world with love, the crucifixion. Salvation moved by love is a deep mystery. It constitutes a mere fold of the love of God. Okay, there's much more by the great elder. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to it. We're already at an hour and 35 minutes. And I said tonight we're going to probably have to cut it short because I'm not feeling very well. But let me share a little bit more directly from the great elder about this very important aspect here about freedom and love and how that is to be understood in the church. He quotes St. Isaac the Syrian, and he says, this is something I read, and initially I didn't really embrace it, but now I understand it, he says. Humbly, the elder says and shares with us this. This is the 81st homily of St. Isaac the Syrian, and he says, in the final analysis of all these things, our God and the Lord, due to his strong love for his creation. All right, this is on the basis of everything, all the economy of God, for his strong love for his salvation. And this is the key: strong, great love, burning love. Right? Again, the word, as I said earlier, is pothos. It's a Greek word, and it means great desire, burning love. He gave his son to the death on the cross. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son to suffer death for it. John 3:16, the famous line, everybody should know that. This was not because God could not save us in a different way, but because this was the way that God found to show and teach his immense love. Our mind cannot grasp this. He touched us. He drew near to us through the death of his son to show us how much he loves us. He loves us exceedingly, and if he had something even more precious than his own son, he would have given it to us. All this was accomplished so our human race could find its way back to him and to draw near to him. As we've said many times, every single thing that happens from God, in God, by the church, in the church, if it's of God, is for salvation. Everything that is not about salvation is about the world, it's about other aspects. It's very kind and wonderful and sweet and pretty, but it's not about salvation. It's not leading to salvation. It's not of God. It's not a part of his plan. It's not a part of his economy. Everything he did for our salvation. Because of his great love, he did not wish to bind our freedom. Even though he could do this, he chose to let us to come to him in the spirit of love. All these things, my friends, express the mystery behind those things that must take place. With this solution, the love of God is made obvious, so at the same time, the freedom of the individual is preserved. This is the great mystery that, by the way, many heterodox have fallen and stumbled here. Calvinism, some of extreme Augustinianism, these are examples of them stumbling on this truth that we're talking about right now, this freedom and love together, inseparable. The freedom of the individual is preserved at the same time. God is truly wonderful. These two elements, freedom and love, espoused and working together in the life of the faithful individual, will give birth to holiness. Why do we have a dearth of sanctity in the world? Why do people say about the loss of sanctity, the loss of holiness, loss of respect for the human person? Right here. This is why. Because Christians, those who call themselves Christians, stepped away from this experience and this truth and this life, and they lost the narrow path, the royal path, the balance, and everything swirled out of control and continues to swirl out of control in the Western world, but all throughout the world today. Those things that must take place soon. Third term now. Revelation must soon. Soon. How soon? St. Andrew of Caesarea says, Some of these prophecies are at hand, ready to happen, and if you will, they began to happen as soon as the book was written. And those things that will be at the end of history and are prophesied will take long, because 1,000 years for God is as one day, as yesterday. Things, Elder Athanasius says, things are like a chain, right? They start out as a chain that extends until the close of history. We talked about this last time, about the cyclical and linear, the ball that rolls through history, repeats itself, and yet goes forward, right? So this soon means a quick start, not necessarily a fulfillment, not the end. It starts, it ends immediately. No, it starts immediately, but a constant and continued revelation. A total fulfillment of this revelation will be at the end, right? The total fulfillment of the revelation of Jesus Christ to the Apostle John will be at the end of history on the second coming. The beginning and the end of these events, therefore, are seen under the spectrum of one and the same image. Let me repeat that. The beginning and the end, Alpha and Omega, one person, Jesus Christ. The Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end of these events, therefore, are seen under the spectrum of the same image. So the elder says, look, 2,000 years from Abraham, 2,000 years before Christ, God tells Abraham that he'll be the father of many nations. It seemed to them very far away, 2,000 years before Christ. And now, it's been 2,000 years since the first coming of Christ. He says, he says elsewhere in a great homily on the, at that time, coming so-called Eighth Ecumenical Council. He's talking about the Council of Crete that eventually happened. It's an amazing homily. Elder Athanasius is an amazing homily, prophetic homily. This is probably in the 90s or early 90s, I'm guessing. And he's talking about the preparation for this. And he says in there, quoting the same thing here that he quotes, talks about this 2,000 years have passed. We're close, he says. Forgive me, you might disagree with me, he says. You might think I'm crazy, but I think we're close. I think we're close. And he says, just like the phrase from the professor Bratsiotis, he was a professor in Athens who taught years ago in the 70s, 60s and 70s, and he wrote a commentary in the book of Revelation. And he says in that commentary, it is like we can hear and sense the galloping of the horses, the galloping of the upcoming events. We can sense them already, like the galloping of a horse on a cobbled street. You can imagine that. You can feel that, right? You can hear the hooves hitting the cobbled street, right? It's coming. This is what he says about our days, Elder Athanasios. You can feel it coming. You can sense the end of the world coming, he says. It's understood that these events are on their way quickly, and yet 2,000 years have passed. Now we can pose the question, might the end of history be near, or at least the beginning of the end be near? And he answers, my friends, perhaps. So that's the end of our lesson. The Lord is coming. Come quickly, O Lord, we pray. And this will be our constant return to this phrase again and again and again. This is what we want to have, each one of us, that stance, that eschatological stance, that vigilant stance, that watchful stance, that we look for the coming again of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.